And again, I'd like to welcome you. The idea of building a resilient community here in Port Alberni is of prime importance to many of us. There's been a great deal of thought going into it from a number of quarters, a lot of activists discussing, and really when the rubber hits the road, the true sustainability is, at least in large part, consists of people doing business locally, buying locally, producing locally, and generating but ideas within the community. And some people have already started doing that.
Hi, I'm Guy Langlois. I'm new to Port Alberni, and I just have to say it's such a wonderful town, and really happy to be here. I've been getting involved with various groups, and I'm really happy to be involved with the Transition Society or Transition Towns group. So my presentation tonight will be on green building and working towards net zero energy. So what I like to do is present some solutions to you so that you can consider it if you're considering to build a new house, or also have a proposal for the community. What I want to do is propose some solutions to retrofit all existing houses in town. So I'm going to show you a few options if we can get it going. And I moved to Port Alberni to work at North Allen College, teaching carpentry at North Allen College. I have a bunch of brochures over there, and if you'd like to talk to me about some of our programs. I used to teach at Which one is it? Green Building 2. So I used to teach at VIU in the Green Building and Renewable Energy program, and that was there we go. It looks a little squished. Okay, great, thank you. So what's the impact of building on the environment? And so buildings actually do have a huge impact. The guy from the city there was saying is that he was finding that the biggest demand in energy was for their existing buildings. So 30% of raw materials go into buildings, 27% of energy use, 30% of landfill. Now, when there's a boom, that actually goes up in numbers, and so that's including all new and renovations, and 13% of greenhouse gas emissions in BC. So it's a pretty huge impact. So what is green building? Well, it's part of a solution. It's not just, there's lots of different ideas to try to address the problems of greenhouse gas and global warming, but certainly farming is one, and I'm involved with that issue also. So to create a green building, what we do is we select durable materials, and the first thing I put up there is wood, because it's my favorite material to work with, being a carpenter, but there's other solutions out there, and cedar is one of the best ones. We also have to consider the embodied energy in the building. Like, this comes right from where the materials come from the transportation of those materials to the site, and how those materials are used on site. So there's like a life cycle of a material. I like the presentation from that young man there was talking about reusing existing wood that would be thrown away. Green building, one big principle is to reduce thermal bridging. I teach building science, so that's, it may sound, what is thermal bridging? Basically, it's the transfer of heat through a wall from studs. This is a thermal image map that you would take with a thermal camera, and it's showing where the heat loss is in a house. So basically where all the studs are is where you lose some of your heat. Of course, most of the heat is loss of windows, but, you know, so this gives you an idea of where the heat loss is in the house. And of course, we want to increase insulation, make it airtight. But when we make it airtight, we have to ventilate and try to create a better indoor air environment. So air quality is really important. And we have to consider some way of heating the building. My presentation is mostly about the building envelopes. And so passive heating would be considering the energy of the sun. So we would position a house on the lot so that the sun would come through the windows and heat some mass inside of a house, and then we'd ventilate just passively by providing windows that would ventilate the house. Of course, we need to conserve on materials by the design of our houses and reduce construction waste. The last one I've added on there is my own little thing that I've added on to green building principles, is designing for the region that you're building in. In Vancouver Island, you can see it. Ooh, that map's really squished. But Vancouver Island actually shares two hydrothermal regions in North America. So we're actually a part of a marine climate and a cold climate similar to what's in central United States. But our building codes throughout Canada and the rest of Canada is very cold building climate. So where our building codes are we share the same uniform building codes across Canada, so we end up with some issues with that. So we try to create regional requirements for our building codes. And one of that is like vapor barriers and ventilation. The rain screen was one of those issues. So the big point here is to design a house and build a house that's appropriate for your region. So I don't want to make too long a presentation here. So we've got the advantages of green building would be to mitigate climate change, to lower operating and life cycle costs, to reduce energy demand, reduce construction waste, reduce emissions of hazardous substances, reduce reliance on natural resources, and water conservation. This is all possible. This is being done, and there are a lot of ways of doing it. A good example, it was CMHC sponsored a program called the Equilibrium Program at the bottom of the screen there. And this example here is in Edmonton, Alberta. I like this example because this contractor is one of the best contractors, in my opinion, in Canada for building net zero buildings. What is a net zero building? Basically a building that would, has net zero energy consumption, and how it does that is by actually creating energy by photovoltaic systems, and also with consideration of all the materials, you consider the carbon emissions annually, and that should be net zero too. And how we do that in a cold climate is we increase the insulation, we seal it, make it airtight, and we insulate, which means thermal design for solar thermal, okay, and provide thermal mass. So in this example here, why I like this one is that it shows you the actual dollars and cents. I get this kind of question all the time. It says, how much does it cost? You know, is it going to cost, is going to increase the cost of my construction quite a lot? Well, I usually have a set answer. It says, well, maybe about $5,000 or $6,000. Most people are pretty shocked in a new construction that could come that cheap. So basically, it's just a different philosophy in teaching. In construction, so basically, we're looking at increasing the wall thickness and adding a little bit more insulation. So in this example here, of the net zero home, it actually costs $109,000 to achieve net zero energy. So that was to provide the photovoltaics and the hot water heating system, but only $18,000 of that $109,000 was actually created 85% of that energy conservation. So let's break it down and look at that and what happened. So the 18,000, out of the 18,000, we're looking at better insulation, windows, heating systems that are more efficient, appliances, and passive solar design for a total of $18,000. So we got the impact of 85%. Then we look at solar heating systems, hot water heating systems. They would have evacuated tubes type systems on your roof. And those systems for this project was $37,000, and it achieved 10% of that goal. Then we look at photovoltaic systems to actually bring that to 100% net zero energy, and the cost of that system was $54,000, and only achieved 5% of the goal. So there's your numbers. So what you need to look at is what would you do if you were going to invest in a new construction and get your best buck. The Germans are actually really good at this. They have developed a system called Passive House. And what we've got here is an example of a double wall system. The contrast is not too good, but basically it's two independent walls, 2x4 walls. I've built hundreds of houses like this in the Northwest Territories, and you get about an R44. Most people, the first reaction says, wow, that's overkill, you know. But, you know, in Germany, this is what they're building their houses. It's a really good design. It came out from Canada. A Saskatchewan farmer came up with the idea. It's part of the R2000 program. I'm just going to go through a few things really quickly here. Insulated concrete forms are a system that's gaining popularity. Habitat for Humanity had adopted this building method a few years ago, so all their buildings are built with this specification. A very highly efficient system, though it uses a lot of styrofoam, which is dependent on oil. I like this system. This is one of my favorite ones. Durasol. It's made in Canada, in Ontario. It's basically a fiber cement product. You take waste products from mills, really good use of pine beetle wood, mix it with cement, and you make a block. And our value of this block would be about R30. What's beautiful about this is you pour concrete in it, and then you have thermal mass in your walls. A very, very energy efficient system. Can be cut with a saw, so it's very versatile. Structural insulated panels is another system that's hasn't really quite caught on, but there's a few good contractors on the island, and I have a few links there. But what I'll do is give you a link at the website at the end of the presentation to write down, and you can get all this information. One thing I don't like about this is basically the indoor air quality of these buildings. It's a super airtight building, and you're basically living in a styrofoam cup. So there's lots of off-gassing from the plastics and the plywoods and the formaldehydes, and I just don't think that the air quality in these buildings is good. This is something I came across in my research. The Now House is an initiative in Ontario. So this was actually a part of the CMHC Equilibrium project. So it's a retrofit. This was basically a wartime house. Previously, to CMHC was called the Wartime Houses Limited, and they built and sponsored hundreds or millions of or close to a million houses like this throughout Canada. So we have houses like this in our town. They were built pretty quickly to accommodate workers in the wartime. So they're typically 2x4 walls with little or no insulation. And so this is a huge challenge for Canada. All these houses exist, and they're consuming a lot of energy. And so this example here is that they retrofitted this house to net zero. And so they actually reduced their emissions by 5.4 tons. They achieved net zero. So it's all the electricity. It's all looking pretty good, except affordability. So again, when you add the solar water heating systems and photovoltaic systems, that's what's adding to the cost. If you wanted just to basically retrofit the building, you could do this. This is the standoff wall system. I built, well, let's say I retrofitted when I was working for public housing close to 680 units for public housing using this system. So I know the results. You can actually achieve quite a lot of energy reduction with this system. So it's basically building a truss outside of a wall system. So there's no disruption of the inside space at all, and all the building is done outside. When you do that, you can put new siding, you can put your rain screen, and address all the problems with moisture in our region here. So this is one of the best solutions. So what I'm proposing here is a community type initiative so that we get together and provide some retrofits for existing buildings here. So we would have to develop a local team to discuss this and set goals for our community. And to try to reduce our energy consumption in these existing buildings by at least 25%. And we can achieve that. I know that I've actually seen 30% energy reduction in these buildings when we reduce them. when we retrofit them, sorry. So we'll explore funding opportunities and bring designers, builders, and I have to tell you that we actually have those people available. I was involved with a group of contractors in Nanaimo, and we actually built a net zero home there. So there's a good example for you to look at if you want, or if you're interested. But I would like to do that here in Port Alberni, and we'll retrofit one existing building to net zero, or perhaps just retrofit it to get 25%. Right. So there's the website if you wanted some more information on this presentation and all the links that are there. I could have talked for a couple more hours, but I hope you enjoy the presentation. So I'll be right over there, and I've got lots of information for you there about our college programs. Thank you very much.
And that concludes this part of the program. I would just like to say in closing that what we really want this to be is the first round of conversation. We want this conversation to go out into a broader community. We want these businesses to talk to other businesses that they know, that we can do business and promote sustainability at the same time. And in doing so, that's how we'll build a better, more resilient community. And thank you very much for coming, and do circulate around and ask questions of the speakers and talk to each other. Thank you.